Hello guys, welcome once more to the Miss Square channel, and all of you guys are welcome. So today we're going to be talking, or we're going to begin a journey where we are going to start diving into a bit of complex stuff. Yeah, because now we are actually not going to start the journey. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about functions, right? So functions are really important in basic coding journey or coding journey that we do, because functions are self-contained blocks of code. Okay, so basically they perform a specific task or a set of related tasks. So that's it already. And also, for a function, what we need to note is that it has a return value. Well, some have a return value and a name, at least. So and we are going to see cases where we have a function which uses a return value, and a case where we actually also have something called a void. Okay, void, which just means no return value, no parameters or arguments. So we are going to see that. So let's start usual. Okay, so I'm going to close this, and we are going to come here, okay, to the bin, and we're going to create a folder. We're going to call it functions. Okay, so we are going to call that functions, and as usual we're going to create our first file, which we're going to call example1 dot. Okay, so let me zoom in a bit, at least so that those who will be trying to follow on their mobile devices can follow us along with us. Okay, so we have now that open in our terminal, and we close this. Okay, so let me just reduce this a bit. Now, so we already spoke about functions, right? So let's write a simple function that just prints a message, like a hey message. So we're going to start with a main function, because this itself is main. Okay, and we're going to study the structure. So let's come down here and say void. We're going to say print hey. Okay, and we're just going to print hey. So this is it. And now you see this function, this is what we call the return type. The what comes in front of the function is what we call the return type. So when we say void, it means we're actually telling that this function is not going to return anything. Okay, and this is the name of the function that we are using. This is the name. It's called print hey. In this case up here, it's called main. Okay, and this one is a kind of special function in that knows that this is the entry point of this application. This example one that when that wants to compile or run this file, it's going to start. It's going to look for the function called main. That's how it's going to do. So it's going to look for the function called main and start executing whatsoever it finds within the block, within this block of code. Remember, we said functions are what? Self-contained blocks of code. Okay, so this is going to be happening within the function itself. So let's continue then. Okay, so these are the parentheses. Okay, here we have the parentheses here. So excuse me there. So here we have the parentheses, and these parentheses here are just to accept arguments or parameters. Okay, I'm going to be using them interchangeably so not to confuse ourselves. Okay, so we accept the arguments or the parameters, and these curly braces that you see here, this curly braces is what define the block of code. Okay, so anything contained within this curly braces belongs, or it's under this main function. Likewise the print hey, and now we just have a simple statement here that says print hey. So now this place is within this main here is what we're going to call it it's called the call site. Okay, the call site means this is where the function gets called in order for it to be executed. Because as it is like this, if we try to bring up the terminal and we're trying to run example one dot dot, okay, we see actually that is we have nothing being printed on the screen. That's because when that compiles, it gets into this main function and actually there's nothing in there. Okay, remember comments, these slashes are comments, right? And they are just there to make our work a little bit, not a little bit, they're just there to make our work precise by just providing some explicit information that doesn't need to be printed on the screen. Okay, so on the call site now, we're going to call a function, say print hey. Okay, and let's not forget semicolon. And now if we say print, if we say that example one dot dot, now we get hey get printed. Now we get hey printed. So that was that for the example one. Okay, so now let's go into example two. Let's create our example two. Example two dot dot. Okay, so now in this example two, we always provide a return type. So usually when you get to work on bigger code bases, okay, it's always a good practice to provide a return type for the function which you're going to use, or yeah, for the function which you're going to use. It's always good to provide a return type. Now for languages like Swift, Rust, especially Swift, Rust, and I think also TypeScript, you need to always provide a return value, because these are strongly typed languages, just like the way that also does it. These are strongly typed languages, so you always have to provide a return type for their functions. Now, what we could do about that, so let's say for example we had something like this, and we had say print hello, and still this function, what this function just does, it just prints hello. It prints hello. Now you see here that here we're able to provide this function without a return type, right? Now say we wanted to enforce that this function should have a return type. Now what we just do is that we go to the analysis underscore options.yaml. Okay, now this file contains pretty all the configurations that that static analysis is going to use. Okay, the static analyzer is going to use in our projects to be able to work. Okay, and we have some couple of linters. Okay, so for example, let's add some linters here. Let's add the linter that I want to show you, so we can commit this out. Nope, let's do this. Okay, so now the linter we're going to use is going to be called always declare return types. Not like that, types. Okay, now always declare return types. If we now get to this example 2, now you see that static analyzer, or that is showing us a warning. Okay, it's not an error, but it's some sort of warning or information that the function printer should have a return type. Try adding a return type to the function. So it's always a good practice that in your code bases you can enable such linters. Okay, and I think in one of my previous videos I did cover up basically what these linters are all about, and if you need some more linters you can visit the that.go call linters. Okay, they have some pretty good extension good linters, okay, that can help you boost your productivity in your work. Okay, so we are not going to switch that off. Okay, and so that's, like I said, so it's a good practice for that. Now so that's that. So you can also see that here, that without a return type, if we were trying to print this do not thing, this function here, so let's try to comment out, let's bring in another print hello. But we're going to say print hello 2. Okay, so as not to confuse ourselves, print hello 2. Okay, and then we just leave it like that. Now if we were to come here at this call site and we try to print hello 2. Okay, now let's bring this up a bit. Let's clear the terminal and say that example 2. Now we see here that the return type is null. Now, not actually the return type. Let me get to explain. Now we see here that we have null. Now why do we get null? We get null because whenever we provide a function and we don't specify the return type, okay, that automatically comes and assigns that this is dynamic. So we still have this, we still have this dynamic. Remember in the data types we covered, dynamic is also some sort of data type. Okay, so now that this is what that does behind the scenes. It puts this as being dynamic, and then the return type of this function becomes null. So so that's that for that. So so I hope this was pretty straightforward to understand and grasp. Okay, so we are now going to be going to example 3. Let me close this. I'm not going to be going to example 3. Example 3 the dart. Now in example 3 the dart, if you have a function that returns void, you just go ahead and just invoke it. It's basically not even basically, it's kind of like bad code to have a function that returns void or nothing or nothingness. Okay, because void it's more for nothingness, and you try to store that in a variable. So let's say for example we have this, okay, and we have this our function here. Let's say void do nothing here. Okay, and it just does nothing. And what I'm basically talking about, we have something like this void, and we say value is equals to do nothing here. So this is just what I'm trying to say, that it's of no point trying to do this, like a function that returns void and you try to store that in a value of type void. Okay, this basically, I'll just put here by the side, this is basically invalid. So invalid code, let's just say bad code. Yeah, invalid code or bad code. Okay, so this is invalid, this is bad, right? So that's that for example 3. Now we are going to go with example 4. Okay, example 4 dot. Now in example 4 the functions can have parameters. So far when we have been defining if you have been noticing along, I've been talking about these parameters, this stuff here, what the function is accepting, or if I could use the word, what the function will engulf. Okay, so functions can have parameters, and we are going to start with the first, which is actually named parameters. And now these named parameters are actually enclosed in curly braces. Now what do I mean by curly braces? I'm just going to put a little information here. Named parameters, okay, enclosed in these curly braces. This is what I mean, these curly braces here. So let's say we have a function that's, let's go again, provide a main function. Now I'm going to have a function that says hello to a certain name or to a certain user, and we are now going to work on that. So let's say we use void, say hello to let's say maybe me, or let's say hello to anyone. Yeah, let's just go like that. Anyone, and we're going to have this string name. Okay. Now, without the curly braces, we will have to pass the parameter by force. Okay. So maybe before even going that far, let's let me demonstrate that to you. So let's comment that out, and let me say something here like hello. Let's just say hi to John. Let's just say hi. Let's just say hi to, and we just say string, and we say name. Okay, and here we print hello there, or let's say hey there, and then dollar sign and name, and something like that. Okay, nothing really complex, just something pretty simple. So now if we go to if we call that function on a call site, okay, and you see we can do this. We with this normal function without first of all having the parameters. That's if we provide a function like this, right? That is going to complain that we have one position argument expected, but it has found 0. So it's saying that we need to pass this. It's, if I should use the word, it's required, it's enforced, you are obliged to do that. So if we say for example Austin, sorry about that. So if we say for example Austin and we're trying to run that example 4, okay, now we get hey there Austin. Okay, so that's that for this set of functions, but now we are more interested in the name parameter. So that's just something you should also get to know, not like it's not important, but you should also get to know that. So we now have this name parameters in functions. Now when name parameters, you need to have a default value or you can make it optional. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Remember, we have in the previous videos we have talked about optional. So when we talk about optionals, we mean this. So we can make it optional, or we have to provide a default value to it. Say for example John Doe. Okay, so for example John Doe. Now if we, okay, let me just duplicate this function. So we are going to see basically the other scenario where it is null. Okay, where we don't have a default value but we have null. Okay, where it is optional, not actually null, but where it is optional. So I'm just going to copy this statement that we have up here and paste it down here and here. So okay, so now we're going to start with the first function, which is this say hello to anyone, which has a default value. Now if we say hello to anyone, now here you see we can do this. Remember with this first function that we had this, we couldn't do this, we couldn't remove this, it complained. But now you see with this second function, which are name parameters, we can do this. So that means the call site is not obliged to pass in a parameter or an argument. Okay, so but for the first type, okay, it is required. So if we try to run that and we say example for that, we get the hey there John Doe or hi there John Doe. Okay, we get that being printed in a terminal. So but nevertheless we can also still provide our own values, okay, by saying Austin Garrett. Okay, so with that, if we clear that and we do example 4, you see now this value that we're providing here gets overwrites this value that is here, this John Doe, and we get a hey there Austin Garrett. Okay, so and the way we write it is that you need to provide this name parameter. Okay, so it's not like it's something. So if here for example was let's say cats, okay, and we had to use, obviously we have to use cat down here, then up here too I think I changed it. I changed it in the wrong place. So if we said here was cat, obviously here down here cat, and then here we'll have to make that cat. So this is how we access we provide values to named parameters in a function. Okay, I'm just going to undo that so we get back to this. And you see now if we try passing null, okay, now we get an error that the argument type null can be assigned to the parameter type string. Okay, so this is the case where now we are, if we are to encounter such a thing or such an error, then we should think of making this function optional. Okay, so now we are going to now study case 2, which is optional, and I'm just going to make a case 3 where we are going to combine or try to talk about combine the two of them. Okay, so we are going to comment this out and we're going to say hello 2. Okay, and in this hello 2 we can actually do this. So you see here we can still do as this first one. Okay, remember with that, with this first one I'm just going to duplicate this a little bit and comment this one out. Now remember that with the first one we could do this and have a default value being printed to the console, which was John Doe, right? Now, do you kind of like guess what is already going to happen? Because here with this second example, we don't have a default value. Okay, let me just bring this down a little bit. Because here in the second case, we don't have a default value. But let's see what is going to happen when we're going to run the function. What is actually going to be placed, or what is this name variable, or let's just call it a placeholder, or this name parameter. Yeah, what is this name parameter going to hold? Okay, so if we say that example 5 example 4, sorry, now we see hey there John Doe, which corresponds to this actual first function which has been printed, okay, with the default value of John Doe. And now we get this second function which also gets printed, but the only difference is that we get a null. Okay, we get a null which is being printed on the terminal. Now this is because we said this can have a the parameter can have a value at the call site, or we can just pass nothing to it. Means nothingness, it's like equivalent to saying null, like nothing. Okay, so that's why it then gets null being printed here, because what we're saying that this argument contains either null or it's going to contain either null or a value or a string value. Okay, so that's that. So if you want to get a better insight of this concept, you should watch my videos on optionals. Okay, optionals. Yeah, you are going to better have an understanding of that. So this was just a quick glance through, a quick swipe through that. So that's that. So now we are going to comment this out. Let me just remove this here. So we are now going to comment this out, and now we're going to have another function. Oh, let me just create an example 5 for that. Okay, so that we don't get this example 4 too clustered. Okay, so we're going to get an example 5, not T, example 5 the dot. And now in this example 5 the dot, we're going to try to combine what we just learned. Optional. So we're going to get, so what we're going to have here is an optional default named parameter. Let me call it like that, if I can, if you can permit that. So we're going to say optional default named parameter, or let's say parameters. Okay, so usual. Okay, so now we're going to have a function here that we're going to say void describe. Say describe describe country. Okay, so void describe country, and in this void describe country we're still going to have a named parameters. Okay, named parameters. Now the reason why we also call it name is because of this name here, right? For example, when we want to access it, we provide this with these names here, name parameters. So with that, now we are going to provide some default values. Okay, so let's just say, should I really go with describe country? I think I'm going to go with describe fruits. Yeah, that will be better. Describe fruits. So in this describe fruits, we're going to have a stream, okay, name, and to it we're still going to provide a default value of, say, an apple. Okay, and here we're just going to print um this is, and then we're going to provide the name, or let's just say the fruit you, let's say you are looking at. Okay, we're going to have something like that, and let me just replace this here. Okay, so this is just a basic function that just describes fruit. Well, maybe not basically describing, because we're just looking at something here. So but you get the point, so we are now going to have cases. So let's try the first case is that we're going to say describe fruit without passing in any arguments or parameter. Now, and the second one was still going to have describe fruit, but now in this case we are going to say fruit, and we're going to say null. Okay, now that here is smart enough to understand that we can accept null on this fruit because we said it was optional. Okay, sorry about that, because we said it was optional, so that's why we can accept that. So now we have now the third case. We are now going to provide the fruit, and in this third case, let's go ahead with avocado. 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 Okay. So this, we have pretty three scenarios here, and let's see what each of them will produce in our terminal. So I'm going to bring this a little bit up here. I'm going to clear that, and we're going to say that example 5. Okay, now this is it. So in the first case, we saw that since we didn't provide any value to it, right, it had to go ahead and use the default value which was provided. That's why you say this is an apple you're looking at. Okay, now in the second case we provided null. Why? Because we said this fruit was optional. Okay, and now we get null bill printed here. So this is um maybe, anyways, and yeah, and null. Excuse that, but you get the point, and null you're looking at. Okay, so for the third case we have avocado, which we have provided a value for this third case, right? And now we get this is an avocado you are looking at. Okay, so that's how we get to work with optional. Let me give it that name. Okay, just permit me that name, optional default name parameters. Okay, so that's how we're going to work with that. So we are now going to move to example 7. Okay, so I'm going to close this and this and this, and we are now going to move to creating our example 7 dot dot. Okay, example 7 dot dot. Now, name parameters don't have to be nullable if they have a default values, right? Now it's true, we already just covered that in example, is it supposed to be example 7 or example 6? Oh yeah, this is supposed to be example 6. Yeah, so now we already saw that in example 5. Okay, where we could have an optional default name parameter, but it's also a, well, you can still write code. Okay, you can still make it in such a way that your name parameters or your name in the name parameters don't have to be nullable. Okay, if already they have a default value. All right, so and I think it's also a good practice, right? Because why would you want to make it nullable if already you're providing a default value. So if we could just go back here to example 5 just to demonstrate that. So there is no need, so what I'm just trying to say is that there is no need in you trying to do something like this, right, for this case, right? So if we could just, let me just rapidly put you something here. So void describe, so maybe describe me, okay, and then we're going to do something like this, say age, okay, and nope, not this, I can say age, int age, and we're going to provide, nope, provide a default value to it of, let's say, 19. Okay, so we're going to say print, or I am this, I am age years old. Okay, so now what I'm trying to say is that there is actually no point in you trying to say or trying to have something like this. So we said here that was no. Okay, there's actually no point in you trying to do something like this, because already you have provided the default value for it. Okay, in case the user or whosoever will be calling the function in the call site and doesn't provide a value to it or a parameter to it, yeah, a parameter or an argument to the function, you already have a fallback value, a default value or a fallback value, which the computation or during the runtime is going to be used. Okay, so but here it's actually not necessary to do this. Okay, so that's that for example 6, and now we're going to move to example 7. Sorry about that. So now I'm going to move to example 7 dot dot. Now in example 7 dot dot, name parameters in that can also be required. Okay, so required, and you could flip the table around by kind of like saying that always have to pass a value, right? So remember in example 6 we actually said that we could make it in such a way that we have a fallback value, and we we have a fallback value, right? And at the call side we necessarily don't need to pass in an argument, or if we have a fallback parameter, and at the call side we don't need to pass in a parameter or an argument. Okay, so it's the same thing now when we come to making name parameters required. Now name parameters required, just that now is the reverse. Now with name parameters required at the call side we are obliged to pass in a parameter. Okay, so let's get into that. So we have a main function as usual, and we have void do something here, and then we have this. Now how then do we make our name parameters required? We use the required keyword. So say required string and the name, and we're going to go with something maybe very basic and say hey, I am name and I am doing laundry. Okay, basic laundry. So now if we were to call this function at the call site, okay, now you see that now is telling us that we need to provide a value. So if we were to do something like this, the name parameter name is required. Okay, so this parameter name here is required, but there's no corresponding argument. So it's telling us that we cannot do this. Remember the previous functions that we covered, we were able to do this, but with this we can't. We cannot do this. We need to provide a value, and it's kind of like makes sense. Okay, so why would you want a required value and at the call site you won't pass it? So it's the same. So we just pass here and we'll say again Austin, nothing really that complex, and here we just say dart example 7 7 dot dart, and yeah, say hey, I'm Austin and I'm doing laundry. Okay, so this is how you make your parameters required. That means that at the call site, whosoever will be calling the function will have to explicitly provide a parameter to it, to this function. Okay, to this function, a person is going to provide a parameter to the function. Okay, so now let's go to example 9, example 8. Okay, we're going to see different variants. Okay, that we're going to be exploring different variants. So example 8. Now in this example 8, name parameters too can be optional, but they don't have to but they don't have if I should say, to have default values. Okay, yeah, so they can be made optional, but they don't have default values. Okay, so that will mean we still have a main function usual, and then we'll still have the void, and then we'll say do something. I'm still going to go with do something here, and here we're just going to pass in an age. Okay, and this age so let's start here by saying required. We're going to have ints optional age. Okay, but now you see what I was trying to say is that you can provide default values by doing something like this. Okay, so it kind of like makes sense. All right, it's makes sense that we can say we are requiring this value, because when we use a keyword required, we're enforcing that whoever is going to call this function will have to provide a default value to it. So we can say we are requiring this value and we are still providing a default value to it. Okay, so you see here it says the required parameters can have a default value. Try removing either the default value or the required modifier. Okay, so we're going to require or remove the default value. Now in this case we have optional, right? So I'll just go straight forward, right? We're already seen the use cases on how we could go about that. So in this function here we could say if for example age is different from null. Okay, if it's different from null, we could go ahead and print and say print you will be, and we can do something like age plus 2 in 2 years. Okay, so you will be age 2 years old. Okay, in 2 years. Else we will just say ahead with the print, and we will say you didn't. Okay, nope, not that, sorry. So you didn't provide an age. Okay, so basically this is it. Now at the call site, if we do something like this, okay, do something here. So if we're going to take two cases, where the first case we have actually nothing, and the second case, okay, so you see here that we have said is required, so we need to pass in a value. So that means we have age. In the first case we're going to pass null. Okay, so let me just bring back that first case here so that we see, so that we know that which it's going to throw us an error. So we see here, so we can comment this out and right here this will throw an error. Okay, so and the third case, now we can provide a value, let's say for example 20. Okay, so we're going to provide this, and let's try now to run the functions. Okay, say that example 8. Okay, so now in this we have the first case which we provided null, and we can see here, let me just bring this down a little bit. Okay, so we see here now that the first case we provided null, and it said it checked. Okay, is the age different from null? No, it's actually equal to null, so it went to this second block here. and it said you didn't provide me with an age, or you didn't provide me an age. Let's say with an age. Okay, you didn't provide me with an age or an age. So this case now is there. But now in the third case, we have provided an age, which is 20, and then then now it says you will be 22 years old in 2 years. Okay, so this is how we can make um optional required parameters. Okay, but remember that I'm just going to put here that required parameters, okay, required parameters do not need an do not need a default value. Okay, required parameters do not need a default value. Not even that they do not need, they don't, like if you provide a default value, it's going to throw to you an exception. Okay, so let's move. Now name parameters can appear in any order. Okay, so you can provide it in any order, and yeah, so let's create an example 9. Example 9 dot. Okay, so I'm going to close this, and this, and also this. Now when I was saying they can appear in any order, okay, the order in which we're going to specify the values don't matter. So I'm just going to go here, let's say describe, let's just go describing a person, right? We can describe a person, we can provide a name. We can say name. Okay, let's just make this optional so we don't get to type all along. So we can say let's say height or age. Yeah, let's say we'll provide age, also make it optional. And yeah, let's just go that basic information. So here we're just going to say print, we're going to say I am, let's say you are called your name, and you are age years old. Okay, so we're going to have something very basic like this. So now in this, what I'm trying to say is that if we have describe person, okay, I can start with age and I say 20. Okay, and give it a comma, and then the next one can be name, and I can say Austin. Okay, so with this we can go ahead and do that. And you see now in the second scenario, I can just copy this and bring this here. Maybe here, let's try to change this into do. Okay, and let's say 19 or 18. Okay, so if we try to run this, say that example 9, and then we get this: your quarter staying, and you're 20 years old, your condo, and you're 18 years old. So they can appear in any order. Okay, the order doesn't really matter. Okay, so now we're not going to dive into the second, or delve into the second type of parameters we have in that, which are actually called positional parameters. Now let's first of all do the usual, creating a example 10 dot. Okay, now in this example 10 dot, we are going to first of all define some basic rules that we're going to follow. Okay, now we're going to be dealing with positional, okay, positional arguments, parameters. Okay, I told you I was going to be using them interchangeably. Okay, just to avoid so much confusion. But if you want to be precise or make a clear distinction between the two, then you can have to do a research on that to be able to get more precise or concise information on how to do a clear distinction on that. Okay, so let's dive in then rapidly. Okay, without wasting too much for time. Okay, so positional parameters, they have they are pasted in order. Okay, here, so we can say here that order of appearance. Okay, appearance matters. Okay, and the next one is that the they are passed in order don't have names associated with them, and also they are required and can have default values. So a couple of rules there, so we can go with can't have default values. Okay, are required. Okay, and the last, that they don't have names associated with them. Say don't have names associated with them. Okay, so I'm gonna try my best to cover up all of this. Okay, in this already part of the section. Okay, so we're going to say void, say goodbye to someone. Okay, let's just say goodbye to someone. And now the thing here now with position arguments is that we use square brackets. Okay, remember for curly braces it's named parameters, but when we use square brackets it's actually called positional arguments. Okay, so we can say here that string, we can call it person1. Okay, and then we can say string another person. Okay, so let's kind of like remove this here. It must have been provided. Okay, the person parameter can't have a value of null. Okay, so can't have a value of null, so we can do this here. Okay, we can do that. So we can then come in here and try to say print by saying goodbye person and another person. Nope, and another person. Okay, oh, does that happen again to my IDE? Well, this is just something which my IDE usually kind of like gets crazy with. It's actually just bugs like this at times, so we're just going to just continue with that. Okay, so this is this. So now we can provide full bar and have default value. So I guess my idea is kind of like frozen, so let me see if I can pause the video and try to restart my VS Code, and I will be back. Okay, we are back. I just had to restart my ID and we are back now. I think this is actually kind of like wrong, because I just tried it out and we can actually provide default values. Okay, and we can also get optional values. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is that optional arguments, okay, can be optional and be omitted. Okay, so and or can be non-optional and require default values. Because for example, let me explain. So for this case where it is, if we don't provide, it's going to say it needs a default value, like, so the person can have a value of null because it's typed to the implicit default null. So basically what it's just trying to say here is that we need to provide, either we make this null, we make this person here null, or we provide a default value to it. So we have now gone to the second case where we said that require default values that can be non-optional. That is, this is not, or should I say non-optional? Okay, when I for example say non-optional, okay, this is what I'm saying, non-optional for this case. Okay, and I think maybe the best way to be able to describe that is to be cut that and try to make this here and bring this guy down here and kind of like paste this here. Okay, and maybe just do something like this. Okay, so yeah, so this is the case. So non-optional, and then it's going to require you have to provide to it a default value. So it's going to require the default value. And the first part where I said it can be optional and be omitted. Okay, so it can be optional as we have done here. Nope, it can be optional as we, oh sorry, what's this? It can be optional as we have done here, and we necessarily don't need to provide a value when we will be using it at the call site. Okay, so let's then have a say into that. Okay, so let's then get to see that. Okay, so we're going to have a call site. I'm going to say goodbye, and we're just going to use two persons, John and Mary. Okay, so in the first case we're going to say provide nothing is safe. Okay, if we provide nothing it doesn't complain. Second case, say again goodbye, we provide let's say John. That's a string. Let's say John. Now what I was meaning by they don't have names associated with them is that we don't have this parameter in front here called maybe person, as it was with the other cases. Okay, we don't have this parameter here called person. Okay, we just go directly with the value we are, or the parameter we're passing, because of this order of appearance. Okay, this value here is going to be stored in this person here. Okay, so let me just maybe use something like Austin here so that we get to use just John and Mary up here. So in the first case we have this. Now in the third case we're going to say John, and the second person we're going to provide Mary. Okay, the third case we are going to provide, copy the same thing, but here we're going to have here null. Okay, and yeah, I think those are all the cases, because if we try to provide null here, we are going to get an error. Okay, if we try to do this, we're going to get an error that null is not the subtype of string and blah blah. So we get here invalid code. Okay, or argument. So if we try to execute this then and see the different examples that we get, okay, so we can go ahead and clear a terminal and say that example 10. Okay, so we're going to get into example 10 and we get this. Okay, so for the first case we have goodbye Austin and null, because we had a default value here for Austin, and for the second person we didn't provide a value, so null was associated to it. Okay, or nothingness. So now the first key we provided John. Okay, now it went down and it override this. Okay, this was overridden, and then null was still used here. Now in the other case where we used John and Mary, okay, it now says goodbye John and Mary. And in the last case now we have goodbye John and null. Okay, that was pretty straightforward to deal with. Okay, now we are going to do example 13. Okay, now example 13 we're just, okay, example 11, sorry, example 11 dot dots. Okay, now in this example 11 dot dot we're just going to have a function, a name parameter function. So void describe, still describe me, but now in this case we're going to use positional arguments where we are going to have a string. It's still going to be the first one. Okay, we're going to have a name, and for the next part now we're not going to have an optional last name. Okay, optional last name, which is bar. So we already said we can do this, right? We can do this. Yeah, so we can either make this optional or we provide a default value to it. So let's say we provide John, and like I said, I think with this we can also provide though. So this is in the case, so for position arguments, if it is optional, okay, if it is optional, then you can, like the other ones, provide the default value, but you can do this. You can make a variable stand on its own, okay. You can make a parameter stand on its own like this, like as we saw in the previous examples with just describing a basic function, right? Because if you do something like this, like hello, and you say string and you say name, okay, this is valid code. It's valid, but up here it's not, because you have to provide a default value, okay. So that's and yeah, so we just going to provide this here, and yeah, provide the default value of John, or we can have the, okay. So now basically what I just want to do is to provide to an uppercase, okay. So what we want to do here is we're just going to print. So let's just use an if statement to get that. Should we use an if statement? Let's go ahead and use just print. So now here we're going to say you are called $sign first name, okay. And now this is where it gets interesting. Now for the last name, since it's optional, we cannot call directly, let's say for example to uppercase. Say we just wanted that the last name of everybody who calls these functions and provides a parameter and argument to it, the last name is always going to be in capital letters. Now we now don't know. Now you see we get this error that the method uppercase can be unconditionally invoked because the parameter can be null. And yes, it's true, the parameter can be null because of this that we have said here. Now to be able to do this, we use the I think it's called a null operator. I kind of like, yeah, I think this, but this is it, right? Here with this question mark, we are telling that if this value is provided, then call this method on it. But if it is not, okay, fine, just leave it, don't do anything, okay. So let's go ahead and let me show that up. And let's say we're going to say describe me here, and I'm going to say Austin, okay. We could still use the John that's there, right? And remember I said the other matter. So if I say my last name is Austin, okay, we're just going to try that out. And then here it's Gareth, okay. If I say here Gareth and I copy this and I try to swap that out, okay, and I do this. So if we now try to clear that and we try to run example 11.darts, okay, now we get this. Now what about the case where we don't provide it? Not this particular one, this, okay. Now let's say I don't provide this here, okay. Okay, so yeah, we could go ahead to implement something more further than that, than this, okay. We could even check, okay, by just doing something maybe like this, okay, that if it is null then just do nothing. This it's already by telling the compiler that okay, if it is null then just put an empty string on the screen so that we get something like this, nothing actually here. You see in the first case here we had null, but down here we have nothing, okay. So I think this was covered in the previous one of the previous videos on optionals. You can get to visit that. So that could be a better case to implement to be able to catch a case like this, okay. So basically that's it. That's just what I just wanted to show. So you see here that whenever we provide the last name, it gets it gets uppercase and the position matters. It's in the first case here we have Austin and Garrett has been made in uppercase. But now for Garrett and Austin, it's Austin that was made, so the position or the order in which we place the variables matters. But now in this second case where we didn't provide the last name, we just provided the first name. Okay, we just have the first name being printed and then the last name now is null. Okay, or we could actually handle it with the previous case where we had to use the double, if I could use the double null aware operators. Okay, if I can call it like that, and then provide an empty string that actually be shown here should in case this comes out to be null. Okay, because if for example we do something like this, because when we use now this sign here, we this exclamation sign, we're actually telling that we are sure that a last name is going to be provided, so be rest assured that you're going to call this function. Okay, but while with a question mark we actually tell that okay, if the last name is not there, don't do nothing. Okay, just print null to the console, don't do anything. So if I try to clear my terminal and we run that again, and we're going to now get an error which is saying that a null check operator used on a null value, and which is right because in this last example here we didn't provide the value for last name, so obviously this is null, and we are telling that okay, we are sure that this last name parameter is going to have a value, or is going to have something within it. Okay, and then you can call it to uppercase bell, which was false. Okay, we didn't provide that, and then that now threw an error to us with this all these messages here. So that's that for that, and then we are just going to dive into our last case. Okay, our last case, last example. Okay, so that will be example 12. This chapter had quite some lengthy examples though, so that's going to be example 12 dot. Okay, so now we have this example 12 to that. So now with this example 12 to that, we are now going to be working, we're going to push things a little bit further, but we're going to be working with numbers or operations. So say we had a function that adds. Okay, now we could still go ahead and still use this and say int 1 is equals to this, and int b, no, not this, int b is equals to 2. Okay, and now here what we just do is, now remember I said some functions all along, if you notice, even right up example 11, we have just been printing, we have not been returning anything. A return type has always been void. Now but in this case we're not going to have a return type of integer, so we're going to return a plus b. Okay, so whenever we have a return type which isn't void, okay, we always have to use the return keyword and return that same type. Okay, so if here is int, then we should obviously return integers here. Okay, int. And if here is a double, then we're obviously going to return double. If here is a string, then we're obviously going to return a string here. Okay, so we are going to have that, and then we could go ahead and provide this. And now take note that with a return value, it means that when this function is going to finish executing whatsoever it has to do, this value is going to be returned, like it's going to be provided to us. It's like the function is going to take in the parameter, it's going to spit out something. In the other cases, it wasn't spitting out anything. So we're going to have here final, let's say for example hello, or for example let's say added value, or let's just call it value. So we're going to say add, and we can call the add function like that. Okay, and then we can print value. Okay, so if I just rapidly run that, okay, if I rapidly run that here, we now get that example 12. Okay, now we just get a 3, so we can be able to store this. And if to be more explicit in this, is a return type is an integer, we could also specify that okay, this is an int. Okay, say but if you see, if we had to use a double, okay, this is going to throw us an error, not even a warning but an error. So that's for that. And also we have what we call arrow functions. Okay, with these arrow functions, we basically don't provide a return type. We don't provide, not a return type, we don't provide a return keyword. Okay, because this is a keyword, so we don't provide a return keyword. So if I was to do that with the minus, okay, we could say int minus. Okay, and we could still have these values here. Okay, maybe it's something like a higher value. Okay, and now for that we use the arrow key, which is an equals to and a greater than sign, and then something like this, a minus b. And you see that if I'm to use that here, okay, if I'm to use something like value 2, okay, and here I use minus, okay, and I try to print value 2 and set that this, now we get a 1 being printed on the terminal. Okay, that means that works. That's that. Now just for this last example, I'm just going to try something a little bit complex, whereby say we have a function operation which is just going to take either of these, okay, and then just return a value. So it's going to take in two parameters, which are the values, and then also return a value. So it's going to be something of this sort. So we're going to say int, okay, we're going to call it operation, something like that. So we're going to say int a, and now we're going to say now if you look at this return type, right, this stuff is an int, right? But if I want to say, we want to also, because here we're also going to be making use of first class functions, right? So if I want to be able to do something like this, okay, if I want to be able to do something like that, this is how we are then going to go about it. Okay, and I'm sorry about that, not actually putting this here. We are going to do this here. Okay, so this function with a capital F is a data type. Okay, it's a data type, and we could call it here let's just call it operation. I just want to distinguish it from the name of Dart. Expected to find another curly brace. Yeah. Okay, this is a function, so that should be it. Operation, I think. Maybe I'm just going to shorten it. No. Or let's just say type. Yeah, let's just go type. Okay. Or let's just say type of operation. Yeah, that's more descriptive on what it's supposed to do. So this is how we do it. So this int function here, it's what we're trying to say is that this stuff here is a function. So it's going to be a function, right? A function that takes in integer parameters. So this is, so basically that's what these things here means here. So this is a function whose return type, or it's going to be an integer, right? Whose return type is going to be an integer. Now is going to take in integers as well. Okay, why? Because this minus here, they take in integers as I've seen here, and their return type is an int. Okay, so that's what we're trying to say the same thing here. And now it might be a little bit complex, so we won't. So let me try to break this here to a new line. Okay, see if I can get this formatted correctly. So we get this and we get that, and yep. So basically that's it. So now we can now say here, we can use this and say type of operation is just going to take in a and b, and that's all. So this here, we've made use of functions being used as a first class citizen. That's, we're passing a function into a function. So I've made use of first class citizens, and yeah, I just wanted to combine this example here to be a little bit straightforward. So if we, for example, say int value, okay, let's say value 3, okay, and we can call operation, okay, and we can provide 1, okay, and we can provide 3. And you see here that we, with this, we can still do something like this. We can say okay, we can say po plus p1, right? Like this is the function we're providing, and we can still go with a value 4. Now with this case now is that we are now going, since we've already implemented something like this, remember this signature here is basically the same as this here, as this add, sorry about this things popping on the terminal, as this add here, or this is basically the same signature. Okay, so if we were to, that means now we can replace this and just call and just say add. Okay, and now the add is going to be called inside here, and the provided parameters are going to be passed to it. Okay, so the same thing can be done with the minus. Okay, so we can just say minus, and here we can go with something like 10, and let's say maybe 2. Okay, and we can call it value 5. Okay, and we can have a whole bunch here from value 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and we can move that out, and if we try now to clear our console, we say that example 12. Okay, so we now get this bunch of values here, which if for the first one 1 plus 3, okay, because we said it was a 1 plus, we're going to get 4. Okay, and in the second case we have the operation 4 plus 3, and we're using 4 and 3. We're using the add operation or function here, which is obviously 7. In the next one we have a minus to 10 minus 2, which is 8. Okay, so that's that for that, and we have come to an end of this chapter, okay, on functions. And I know it was a pretty lengthy one, and I really thank you for taking your time to follow along, to watch along. I know it wasn't easy, but I really appreciate. So thank you for watching the channel, and I hope you did really enjoy for watching the video. I hope you really enjoyed the session, and let's catch up again for the next chapter that will be coming up. Thank you.